from the origins of that group called the people of Israel. It started about 3,500 years ago in ancient Babylon. In that time, the most of humanity was centralized. The cultural center of humanity was in that place, the cradle of human civilization. But what happened was an eruption of the human ego between human beings, and that brought social conflicts and feuds and rifts in human society. At that time, there was a spiritual leader. That leader was named Abraham, and he was essentially researching what's happening with the people, with the Babylonian people. And what he found out was that there is a problem here, or a natural dynamic, and that is that human ego is growing. And because the human egoism grew, people stopped living like kin, living with each other, and began to have competing agendas, and various conflicts arose, and they divided to different factions and different interests. So what he did was he called upon the Babylonian people. This is, by the way, referenced in various sources, that both him and his father were actually like spiritual leaders or priests of the Babylonian people. But what he did was he told the Babylonian people, we have to try to rise above the division, above the human egoism, and start working on human unity. And if you're interested in that, follow me. Then, like Josephus writes and other sources, until the Maimonides in the more or less the 12th century, many people came to him and joined him. He was a known personality. And the people who followed him were gathered as a group based on the principle of human connection covers all differences. What he taught them was that the human ego naturally grows. It has to grow. Sometimes it grows in a linear way, and at times there is exponential peaks in its development, leaps. And he told them there's no other choice. We have to work with this growing human ego. It's a natural dynamic. What we have to do is learn how to rise above that, how to increase our connection above the growing ego. The more the human ego grows, the more we have to consciously, actively increase human connection. And that's how we can maintain a proper, balanced, good state in society. So the people who followed him were later called Jews, Yehudim. That comes from the word Yehud, unity. He united them. They were united around that principle. And he also explained to them this, that through the unity among them, the conscious unity among them, they can discover the greater unifying force of nature. This is also called God or upper force. In Gematria, which is the numerical value of letters in Hebrew, these nature and God are synonymous. And so he called that group who were practicing this, they were also called Israel, which is a combination of two words, Yashar El, which means straight to God, or straight to attainment of that higher, greater force of nature. So they were people who came from the various tribes and clans and groups that existed in ancient Babylon. But later, they scattered across humanity. But that group essentially became what's called the group of the group of Israel. So the people of Israel are originally not a nation. There's no such nation. They are rather a collection of all those various groups and nations, so to speak, that lived in ancient Babylon. And what happened in Babylon, that clash and social conflict, and what is symbolized as the Tower of Babel, and all that. There's a lot of interesting research about that, but let's not go into all these details. So that group went out of Babylon, and since then they were a group called Israel, Yisrael, working on their unity as the main principle that leads that group. And so they existed that way until the ruin, the destruction of the temple in their land, which was about, let's say, 200 years more or less after, within Common Era. And so then they were expelled from there. Why did this expulsion happen? Because they stopped adhering to the Abrahamic method. They stopped working on their connection, and then what's called unfounded hatred began to naturally rise in them, and they didn't hold on together, and they scattered. But that group, when they stop holding on to their connection that is above all of the differences that they have, they can't hold on as a single group, because they are actually representatives of all the different nations that existed in ancient Babylon. They're a mini model of all of humanity. And so they don't feel a natural connection that every other nation feels. The French, the English people, the Italian, whoever they are, they all have an original connection, and the Jews don't. They don't feel that kind of connection. What they do have is a sense of hatred from the outer world that keeps them together, and if not, they scatter. And this is happening and has been going on to this day. However, the world, in the meantime, keeps developing. Human egoism keeps growing in each and every generation as a natural dynamic. It grows. And along with it, the Jews are no longer connected to that original group so much. It's a scattered group. 10 tribes of it were lost completely, and only 2 tribes are left, which is, let's say, 20% of all that group. However, the fact that they had established for a certain period of time, let's say about 1,500 years more or less, they maintained that connection, that higher level of human connection, that gave them a sensation of how the higher force of nature, the global force that sustains reality, works. And that's why they have a different attitude to reality, to creation, to themselves, and to the world. And it